It's amazing to think about, all those historical mysteries that have been kind of brushed aside or explained away.
Right.
What if there's more to it? Like, what if some of those unsolved puzzles from our past actually point to influences that are uh,
Well,
not exactly from Earth,
yeah.
you know?
It's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, the idea that maybe we haven't been alone all this time and that there might be evidence hidden in plain sight.
Exactly. And that ties into what we're diving into today, this whole idea of ancient alien involvement in human history.
Yeah.
We're going to take a deep look at all those claims from the stuff you've been digging into, like those ancient texts and even modern discussions.
It's really about examining these ideas closely, not just accepting or rejecting them outright. For someone like you who wants to understand things quickly and thoroughly,
But yeah,
this is a goldmine of information. And our goal here today is to explore the possibility that extraterrestrials were involved in our past. See if there are any common threads in these different sources and discuss what it all means if there's actually some truth to it.
okay, so let's kick things off with what are considered by many to be the oldest written records we have, the Sumerian texts.
Right.
These go back about 7,000 years, give or take.
Wow.
And in these texts, there's this incredible story about beings called the Anunnaki.
Oh, yeah.
So who are these Anunnaki, according to the Sumerians?
Well, the Sumerian texts actually paint a pretty vivid picture. They describe them as powerful, godlike beings with advanced technology.
Like what kind of technology?
Well, they talk about things like flying vehicles that they call flying orbs, and their main goal on Earth, it seems, was to mine gold.
Gold.
Interesting.
But it goes deeper than that. The Sumerians believed that the Anunnaki actually engineered humans to do the mining for them. They modified existing hominids to create a workforce. So that could tie into the whole mystery of Neanderthals disappearing and Homo sapiens suddenly appearing.
Precisely. That anonymous official video mentioned this evolutionary enigma, and the Anunnaki story offers a pretty unconventional explanation for it.
It really makes you think.
It does. The Sumerian texts suggest a deliberate intervention in human evolution, and it gets even more disturbing when they talk about how the Anunnaki controlled the human population.
Oh, right. They weren't exactly benevolent overlords, were they?
Not really. They used some harsh measures, even resorting to what sounds a lot like genocide to keep the numbers down.
Wow. It's almost like they were treating humans like livestock.
That's a chilling parallel, isn't it? Makes you question the whole creator-creation dynamic.
Absolutely. So the Anunnaki themselves weren't exactly a united front either, right? There were disagreements among them about how to handle humanity.
Oh yeah, big time. That internal conflict is a crucial part of the story. The texts describe a major split among the Anunnaki regarding humanity's spiritual development.
How so?
Well, one faction believed in keeping humans spiritually ignorant to maintain control. They thought it was the easiest way to rule.
Makes sense in a twisted kind of way.
Right. But another group strongly opposed this. They felt it was wrong to suppress human spirituality.
So what happened? Did they have a big Anunnaki showdown?
Well, according to the texts, this disagreement ultimately led to that massive flood.
The one in the Bible?
Some people believe so. The Sumerian texts say the Anunnaki, who wanted to wipe out humanity, tried to do it with a flood.
To kind of reset things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But of course, the flood didn't completely destroy humanity, so the Anunnaki had to come up with a new plan.
So what did they do?
Well, they scattered the remaining humans across the planet and gave them different languages.
Classic divide and conquer strategy.
Exactly. By creating division, they could maintain control more easily. And what's really interesting is that stories of a great flood and divine beings transporting ancestors to safety appear in cultures all over the world.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
From Alaska to Egypt, Japan, South America. It's pretty mind-blowing. Makes you wonder if they all experienced the same event way back when.
Those are some pretty powerful recurring themes, right? Our origins being manipulated population control this struggle for spiritual understanding. It all ties together.
Absolutely. Now let's jump ahead in time to another civilization that's full of mysteries, ancient Egypt.
Oh yeah, the pyramids, the Sphinx. It's all so fascinating.
And a bit unsettling, too, especially when you consider the age of the Sphinx.
Right. The erosion on it suggests it could be way older than we think.
That's right. There's a lot of geological evidence pointing to significant water erosion on the Sphinx. This type of erosion would take thousands of years to form in that climate.
So the Sphinx could be over 10,000 years old.
That's what some researchers believe. And that throws a huge wrench into our understanding of ancient Egyptian history. Who was around to build something like that so long ago?
It's mind-boggling. And then you have the Great Pyramid. It's an engineering marvel to this day. We still don't fully understand how they built it.
It's true. Those massive blocks perfectly aligned. It's hard to explain with conventional methods.
And what's even more interesting is that the ancient Egyptians didn't see themselves as being alone.
Yeah.
They believed their rulers were gods.
That's right. And they depicted these gods as somewhat human-like, arriving and leaving in flying ships.
Sounds familiar, right? Kind of like the Anunnaki descriptions?
The similarities are definitely there, and when you look at the math encoded within the Great Pyramid, it gets even more intriguing.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that. What is it exactly?
Well, they found mathematical constants like pi and the golden ratio incorporated into the pyramid's design. And there are even values that closely approximate the speed of light.
Whoa, that's some serious advanced knowledge.
It is. And the theory is that this precise math, combined with the pyramid's original reflective casing and its eight-sided shape, could have been used as a navigation beacon for those flying ships.
Like a giant landing pad for the gods.
Exactly. It's hard to reconcile that level of knowledge with our conventional timeline.
So what about secret societies in ancient Egypt? I'm talking about the mystery schools.
Ah, yes, the mystery schools. These were places where pharaohs and high-ranking priests were initiated into secret knowledge.
Like a sort of ancient university for the elite.
You could say that they acted as a bridge between humans and what were described as the ruling demigod species.
So they were the keepers of the secrets.
Exactly. But there's also the idea that there might have been deception within these schools.
How so?
Well, practices like mummification and the elaborate burial of wooden boats were meant to symbolize a journey to immortality.
Right, I've heard about that.
But some believe these practices were distorted versions of genuine advanced knowledge, maybe a way to control the pursuit of true understanding.
Keep the masses in the dark, so to speak.
Exactly. And it's not just the mystery schools. The Egyptian high priests are also depicted as withholding deeper spiritual truths from the people.
This idea of suppressed knowledge pops up again and again, doesn't it?
It really does. And then there's the curious detail about the aprons. Yeah, the Egyptian hieroglyphs often show these non-human gods wearing aprons, and then the Egyptian high priests adopted similar garments.
Interesting. What's the connection?
Well, it ties into the Melchizedek priesthood, and later the Freemasons, who also incorporate aprons into their rituals.
Could be a symbolic lineage or a continuation of those ancient interactions.
It's a possibility. And then there's the alignment of the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid with the star Sirius.
Right, on July 23rd.
That's the day Bohemian Grove has its big ritual, too.
Makes you wonder if there's a connection.
It's a pretty big coincidence if it isn't.
And other ancient sites around the world also align with Sirius and Orion, which were considered the origin points for these beings in ancient legends.
So it's not just an Egyptian thing.
Nope, it's a global pattern. And the Egyptian hieroglyphs for Sirius, the obelisk, the dome, the five-pointed star, are still used by secret societies today.
Wow. So these symbols have endured through millennia. They have. And it suggests a possible continuity of knowledge or influence. The theory is that this priestly class trained in the mystery schools was tasked with managing humanity for these powerful non-human entities.
Kind of like a cosmic middle management.
Exactly. But the theory suggests that humans eventually became too rebellious.
We do have an act for that.
We do. So the narrative says that these non-human entities had to come up with a new strategy. They started recruiting humans into positions of power through secret societies.
Interesting, like a more subtle form of control.
Right. They use the analogy of the Judas goat. Individuals chosen to guide and control their own people, but ultimately serving the interests of these hidden powers.
That's a pretty sneaky tactic.
It is. And now let's shift gears to the Bible. The video you shared had some interesting interpretations of the biblical text.
Yeah, I was surprised by some of those interpretations.
One of the most thought-provoking points is about the word Elohim, which is often translated as God.
Right.
But Elohim is actually plural.
So it could refer to multiple gods.
That's the argument. And then there's the description of Jehovah or Yahweh arriving on Mount Sinai.
In his fiery chariot.
Right. But the video highlights how it sounds more like a spaceship landing than some supernatural event.
Yeah, with all the smoke and fire.
And the restrictions on approaching the landing site, only a select few, like Moses, were allowed to witness it.
Moses, who was educated in the Egyptian mystery schools.
Exactly. He might have had a unique understanding of these divine power structures. And then there's Ezekiel's account of Yahweh's ship.
Oh, right. He describes it in detail, doesn't he?
He does. He talks about a metallic structure with a pale yellow color and beings emerging from it that sparkle like burnished brass.
That definitely sounds more like advanced technology than some ethereal being.
It does. And then there's Yahweh's behavior, his demands for obedience, his violent punishments for those who disobeyed his commands for genocide and the destruction of entire cities.
Not exactly the image of a loving and merciful God.
Not really. It paints a picture of a ruler concerned with maintaining power and control. And let's not forget the other non-human entities mentioned in the Bible.
The Nephilim, the giants.
And the Leviathan, which is described as a dragon in the Greek translation of the Bible.
A dragon? That's interesting.
It is. And in the Torah itself, Yahweh is described with dragon-like attributes, breathing fire smoke coming from his nostrils, possessing wings, living in a mountain.
Sounds very dragon-like indeed.
Even his dwelling among the Hebrews is described as a giant tent with smoky entrances. And then there are those alleged demands for virgins and gold.
All very classic dragon vocab.
Exactly. It's as if cultures all over the world were encountering and describing similar beings, but through their own cultural lenses.
So maybe dragons weren't just mythological creatures after all.
That's the suggestion. The video argues that these dragon gods were seen as the ancestors of the ruling class in many ancient societies.
Whoa, that's a bold claim.
It is, but there's evidence to support it. Chinese historical records mention Nukua, a being described as half dragon, half human, as the creator of humans.
Really?
And the Ye King states that dragons and humans, once interbred Japanese traditions, also talk about descent from reptilian gods who mingled with humans.
So this isn't just a Western concept.
Not at all. And then you have the Aztec feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl, another example of this reverence for reptilian beings in positions of power.
It's a truly global phenomenon.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the Aryan invasion of ancient India around 1500 BC. How does this fit into the bigger picture?
Well, the Aryan invasion is described as the arrival of a technologically advanced group who worshipped humanoid demigods.
And they had those flying chariots called Vimanas, right?
They did. And these Vimanas were said to produce a thunderous noise and a bright red glow. They were also equipped with weapons described as fiery beams.
That was pretty high tech.
It does. And the theory is that the Aryans used their advanced technology and their belief system to subjugate the indigenous Indian population.
By establishing the caste system.
Right. And through the introduction of their gods, which are still central to Hinduism today, it could be another example of a more advanced group intervening in a less developed society and establishing a system of control.
And maybe this was done with the support or even at the behest of those non-human entities.
That's the implication. And it's not just ancient history. The Dune people of West Africa and the Zulu tribe of South Africa both have traditions of contact with intelligent non-humans.
Really? What do their traditions say?
The Dune people speak of advanced beings from the Sirius star system who brought civilization to ancient Sumeria.
Wow.
And the Zulu traditions describe encounters with reptilian and fish-like species, often symbolized by the dolphin and the whale.
So even in modern times, there are cultures that acknowledge these interactions.
Exactly. It challenges our modern assumption that we're at the top of the food chain.
We might not be as special as we think.
We might not. And this brings us to the modern era and the phenomenon of UFOs.
Unidentified flying objects.
Some believe that these UFO sightings are simply the modern-day equivalent of the advanced vehicles described throughout history.
From ancient Sumerian tablets to Egyptian hieroglyphs, the Vedas, the Bible, even cave paintings.
The descriptions are remarkably similar, and now with photography and video we have visual evidence, although it's often debated.
Of course. And then there's Project Blue Book.
The U.S. government's attempt to explain away UFO sightings.
It started in the 1950s, right?
It did, and many believe it was more about controlling the narrative than finding the truth.
Keep the public from panicking.
Exactly. It created a climate of skepticism that persists to this day. And then, of course, we have Roswell.
A big one.
The incident in July 1947 that sparked the modern UFO craze.
The government initially said it was a weather balloon, but then
the story changed. And key military personnel involved in the incident, like Major Jesse Marcel, came forward years later to say that it was a cover-up.
that the debris they recovered was unlike anything they'd ever seen.
Exactly. And his testimony is corroborated by other military witnesses, like Colonel Thomas Dose and First Lieutenant Jack Trowbridge.
They were all ordered to keep quiet about what they saw.
And then you have Gerald Anderson, who claims to have found a crashed craft with non-human bodies inside.
And Eli Benjamin, who says he transported bodies to the Roswell Base Hospital, including one that matched the description of the Greys.
And his story is supported by the local mortician, Glenn Dennis.
So many witnesses all saying the same thing. It's hard to ignore.
It is. And the fact that they were all threatened and told to keep silent points to a concerted effort to hide the truth.
So what does all of this mean for our understanding of secret societies in the modern world?
Well, the video argues that these groups are still active and still potentially working with non-human entities. They point to Germany in the early 20th century as a key player.
Right, Germany's obsession with the occult and the Aryan race.
They formed secret societies like the Thule Society and the Vril Society.
And they were supposedly channeling information from otherworldly beings.
That's right. And they even claimed to receive blueprints for advanced flying machines.
And the Nazis actually made some pretty advanced aircraft, did they?
They did. And some believe that they received help from non-human sources.
I've heard about that. The claims that they were in contact with a reptilian species called the Orion Group.
That's one of the more out there theories. But there's also the testimony of Hermann Oberth, one of the pioneers of rocketry.
What did he say?
He claimed that he and his team received assistance from people from other worlds in developing their spacecraft.
Wow. And then there's that whole thing about Germany's interest in Antarctica.
Right. The expedition in 1939 supposedly is searching for the mythical land of Shambhala and a passage to the inner Earth.
And some people believe that they established a secret base down there.
And that they may have even escaped there at the end of the war.
With the help of their non-human allies.
That's the theory. And Operation High Jump in 1946 is seen as evidence of this.
Right, the massive military expedition to Antarctica that was abruptly cut short.
And Admiral Byrd's warning about hostile aircraft coming from the polar regions.
It all adds to the mystery. And then the Roswell incident happens a year later.
Followed by the creation of the CIA and the National Security Act.
It's almost like Roswell was a turning point.
A moment when the world governments realized they needed to take this threat seriously.
And control the narrative.
Exactly. And then you have the wave of UFO sightings in 1952. Objects tracked on radar moving at incredible speeds and outmaneuvering fighter jets.
Some believe that was a show of force by the Germans and their allies.
A demonstration of their superior technology. And then NASA is founded in 1958.
With Werner von Braun, a former Nazi scientist, playing a key role.
And the Antarctica Treaty is signed in 1959, restricting access to the continent.
It's all very suspicious, isn't it?
It is. And some researchers believe that this all points to a secret space program involving multiple nations and non-human species.
And they cite things like Gary McKinnon's alleged NASA hack and the testimonies of William Cooper and Phil Schneider as evidence.
That's a lot to take in, I know.
It is. So from all this information we've covered, it seems like the idea of ancient alien influence is a recurring theme throughout history.
Absolutely. From Sumeria to Egypt, the Bible, ancient folklore, modern UFO sightings, secret societies, it's all connected.
And it's not just about ancient history. There are those who believe that this is still happening today.
That there are groups working behind the scenes with non-human entities to control the world.
It's a pretty mind-blowing concept.
It is. But the evidence is there for those willing to look.
So what are we left with after this deep dive?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is that we need to keep an open mind. We can't just dismiss these ideas as crazy or fringe theories.
We need to be willing to question what we've been told and look for the truth ourselves.
Exactly. Because if even a small part of what we've discussed today is true, it changes everything.
It makes you wonder what else might be hidden from us. What other secrets are out there waiting to be uncovered?
It's a fascinating and potentially terrifying thought, isn't it?
It is. And I think that's a perfect place to leave it for today.
A lot for our listeners to ponder.
Absolutely.
Until next time.
Thanks for joining us.